Good morning, students. I am Hitesh Karan, your English tutor. Today, we are starting with our new topic, that is The Little Girl. This is the third chapter from your book Beehive. This chapter, from the title, we can see that it's about a little girl, right? So, the little girl, she is the protagonist in our topic. We can relate to that because all of us were children at once, and we can see that this little girl tells us, this little girl we can relate because as a child we used to do the things she did. We used to be afraid of those things which she is, right? The Little Girl. This chapter was written by Catherine Mansfield. She is the author of our chapter. Now, according to me, or in my opinion, the work is important. For example, the chapter, The Little Girl, it's important. But according to me, the writer is important, equally important as well. If you don't know about the author, if you don't know about how she was brought up in this world, what she has faced, how much experience she had in her writing, so you wouldn't understand what she wanted to write and why she is writing from that particular angle. And that is very important. We have to understand the mentality of the author, and I am repeating that sentence again. If we don't understand the writer, if we don't understand what she or he has faced in their life, we can't understand their writings. Number of writers faced a number of problems, greater problems than we can, right? But we can only understand it through their writings. What suffering they had endured. That's how we can understand why they are writing in that particular manner. And that is the most important thing about the writer's life. So, according to me, we should always read about the writer first, and then we should read about his or her words, so we can understand that she has gone through that way. That's why she is writing in that direction. That's why she is describing those feelings, because she went through that. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, maybe they suffered a lot, but what they have suffered, that's what important here, so we can understand why. Right? So, the little girl. It's about the bond between a little girl and her father. We can relate to that. Right? When we were kids, we used to be afraid of our father as well. I don't know about you, but I was. Right? I was scared of my father because my father was a strict person, a disciplinarian. Same goes here. Here, in this chapter, the little girl, her father is a hard-working man and a strict disciplinarian. Same thing we can relate to as well. So, this chapter is about relating to the mentality of a small child, that why she is afraid of her father, why there is a distance in the relationship. If I ask you all, I can say that you all are afraid from their father or your mother, right? Whichever you are afraid of. If I take a poll, I will definitely can say the most number of person will say that we are afraid of our father. That's the same thing Catherine Mansfield has described in this chapter, The Little Girl. Right? She talks about the common bond, the family, the relationship between a small girl and her father. Because her father was a strict, hard-working guy, and her father was kind of, in his own manner, was a little bit harsh to her, and she used to be afraid of him. She used to be scared of him. And why so? That's the question. For to learn that or to understand that, we have to focus on our writer, right? Our author, Catherine Mansfield. So, we will start this chapter by introduction about the author, Catherine Mansfield. If we don't understand about our author, we can't understand what she has been through, what she is, why she is writing in this manner. So, starting with our author, Catherine Mansfield. That was her pen name. pen name or pseudonym. At that time, or at that Victorian time or Elizabethan time, a number of writers used a pseudonym, right? Because they didn't want to write with their original names. Number of at that time women weren't allowed to write, so they used to take a man's name and then they used to write it. After that, it becomes a tradition, and number of people didn't want to take their original name, so they just used a pen name, pseudonym. So Catherine Mansfield is a pseudonym, pen name. Her real name was Kathleen Mansfield Murray. Kathleen, right? Kathleen. Kathleen. That was her real name actually. Kathleen Mansfield Murray. She was born on 14th October 1888. Right? She was born on 14th October 1888 and she died in January 1923. She was born on October 1888 and she died in January 1923. She was a prominent New Zealand short story writer and a poet. Right? She was born in New Zealand and she was a prominent writer in that time. She wrote a number of short stories, she wrote a number of poems. She was also considered to be a modernist. She was also considered to be a modernist. She left New Zealand. When she was 19, she left New Zealand and she went to England. At the age of 19, she left New Zealand, she went to England, and there she met legendary writers. There she met legendary writers who were working in the literature field at that time. To take a few names, there were D.H. Lawrence and Virginia Woolf. D.H. Lawrence is the person who wrote about family values. Right? D.H. Lawrence, in his novel, if you see, he talks about family values, he talks about consequences, he talks about what can happen to a certain person. Right? He took himself as a character in his story David Copperfield and Great Expectation, number of writers, Little Woman, number of novels he has written. The second one comes Virginia Woolf. She holds a legendary name in the literature section when we talk about psychology. Right? When we talk about women's psychology, Virginia Woolf holds a great name. So when she met these guys, she got influenced by their writings, by their character, by their personality. Right? We read number of legendary words and we can assume that what they were thinking. Like we had Road Not Taken. Right? We can get a we can get a point of view about Robert Frost's life, what he was in real life. Robert Frost was a confused man. That's why he wrote The Road Not Taken, where two roads were diverged, right, in a jungle. So same thing here, we can learn a lot about Catherine Mansfield by her words. We can know why she wrote about family values, because she was influenced by D.H. Lawrence, but she also talks about the psychology of little girl, right? Kezia. She is the protagonist of our chapter. So they talk about that as well. So a number of her words came from the influence of other people. If we want to write it, first we have to read about other words, right? What is currently in the market right now. So same thing. She was influenced by D.H. Lawrence, Virginia Woolf. Later, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, TB, right? She was diagnosed with TB and she died at the age of just 34. She died very young. But before dying, she wrote a number of words. Right? She wrote a number of short stories, she wrote a number of poems, and that's why she considered quite a name in that era from the Victorian era, right? Because she was considered to be a great author. Now, Catherine Mansfield, a number of poems and verse was written by her, but the most popular one was The Garden Party, A Dill Pickle, Mr. and Mrs. Dove, The Fly. Right? Those were, if we ours, those were the best works of her. Right? Short stories also, The Little Girl, Princess. She wrote number of short stories. But if we consider the most popular, the best work of Kathleen Mansfield, that would be The Garden Party, A Dill Pickle, Mr. and Mrs. Dove, The Fly. Please note it down. Right? So you will remember what author you are reading and what are her works, her most famous works. Right? So keep that in mind, because you have to remember always that what writer you are reading, where she was born, where she died, what she's been through, if she has any traumatic experience or she lived a happy life, a royal life. You have to understand that, you have to know about it, right? So here Kathleen Mansfield, right, she went through, she taught to D.H. Lawrence, Virginia Woolf. She wrote a number of short stories, a number of poems, right? Best work is The Garden Party, A Dill Pickle, Mr. and Mrs. Dove, The Fly. Right. So this was the brief introduction about our writer, Kathleen Mansfield, pen name. Original name was Kathleen Mansfield Murray. Right. So here, this was a short introduction about our writer, about our author. Now, moving on to our chapter, The Little Girl. Now, this chapter considered two main characters. First one is Kezia. She is a little girl, right? She is afraid of her father because her father is strict in nature. But she was afraid at first, but later she become quite attached to him. She understand that her father loved her in his own way, and she understood that, right? So that's what we will read in this chapter, the bond between a father and a child and her daughter. If I ask you all, girls always says that they are closer to their father and boys will say they are closer to their mother. Here there is difference, right? Her father is strict and she is little girl. So you can think, you can go into that mentality and you can understand that a little girl, a small child will always be afraid of her father. I used to be afraid of my father when I was at that age, but that perception changes with time. All of you doesn't have a good relationship with your parents, but that changes, right? With time, with understanding, with maturity, you got to understand your parents better. Same thing comes here. Same thing comes in the life of Kezia, right? The protagonist of our chapter. Protagonist means main character, right? On which whole story is based on, right? So Kezia, she is the protagonist or main character. Now she is a young girl who is afraid of her father at first, but later she got attached to him by knowing that he got a big heart, he is very understanding, he is very caring, and that she got to understand later. Second major character in this story is Kezia's father. Kezia's father is a hard-working man. He is a strict disciplinarian. Disciplinary means one who always like to be disciplined, one who always like to be in a certain order, right? That's the thing with his father. If we have to take example, we can take example of our Chaturvedi sir. He was a strict disciplinarian. I think all of you will agree to that, right? So we have two major characters. Apart that we have three more characters in this story. First one is Kezia's mother, Kezia's grandmother, and a cook, Alice. And a cook, Alice. So we have five major characters in this story. But the most important are only two, because on those two whole story was based. That is Kezia and Kezia's father. Now, Kezia's mother, Kezia's grandmother, and the cook Alice is also there in this story. Those characters play an important part time to time. Clear? Now let's start with our topic. Kezia is a little girl and she is afraid of her father. She is so afraid of her father that she stutters when she talks in front of him. She is fine if she is talking to anyone else in the family or her friends, if she is talking to her mother, her grandmother, or anyone. She is fine. She don't stutter. But when she is talking to her father, she stutters, right? She used to hide in the room whenever her father was in the house. That's how much she was afraid of him, right? That's how much she was afraid of her father. She was relieved whenever her father goes to work. She got relieved because she has the whole house. She has whole house for herself, so she was bit of relieved at that time. Things changed when her father comes home. She used to hide in her room. She doesn't want to face her father because, according to her, her father was a giant. Right? Because she was a little girl, and when she saw her father, she assumed that he is a giant who is strict in nature, who is a disciplinarian, who doesn't love her, and they who doesn't love her, and they doesn't interact that much as well. So she is afraid of her father a lot. But this changes later in the story. Now, she is afraid of her father. Whenever her father left house, she becomes happy because she can move around in the house. She doesn't have to answer to anyone, and she was happy, right? But when her father comes home, she used to hide in her home, right? That's how you can understand the mentality of a child, right? Because she is that much afraid of her father. Now, Kezia's father knows this, and he always, whenever he comes back home, he always asks Kezia, "Have you been a good girl?" Right? Have you been a good girl? To that, Kezia always answer, "I don't know, father." But whenever she answers, she stutters because of the scaredness, because she is afraid of her father. So she always used to stutter, "I don't know, father." Right? And he always used to reply in the same manner by stuttering, "You don't know." Right? But when this happens, he said to her that if you don't talk properly, you have to go to the doctor. Right? Once what happened, her grandmother, on a Sunday, her grandmother sent her to the drawing room, right, where her mother and her father used to relax, right. Her grandmother sent her in that room because she wanted her to connect with her family, right. She wanted her to connect with the family because she is afraid of her. She doesn't talk to her father, and that's the best way. If you want to talk to your father, you have to convey your thoughts to her, thoughts to him. So that's what happens. So she sent her to that drawing room. But what happens? When she goes there, her father was lying on the sofa and her mother was reading a novel. So she felt ignored, a little bit ignored, because they didn't talk to her, right? Later, what happens? One evening, she was feeling a little bit cold, so she took a leave from the school, right? So Kezia's grandmother told her that you should make a pin question. It's like a regular question, so you should make a pin question. So, because your father's birthday is coming next week, and you should stitch it with your own hand, so it will be a great gift for your father. She liked that idea. She thought, yeah, yes, it's a good way to get close to your father. So she started stitching a pin cushion. It's like a regular pillow, right? She started stitching a pin cushion. But then when she stitched the three sides, she realized that I need something to fill the cushion. She searched everywhere. She searched the whole house and she couldn't find anything. At that time, she went to her parents' room. There on the desk, she found some papers lying there. She thought they are good scraps, so she just took those papers, tore it down, and stuffed it into pin cushion. Now she doesn't realize that those are important papers, right? She is a child, she doesn't knew that. So she just tore all the papers up, stuffed it in the pin cushion, and stitched the fourth side. Now her gift is ready. But when father came back home and he was finding his papers, they weren't there. So he asked Kezia, "Where are those papers?" She replied honestly. She said, I tore it down and I stuffed it in the pin cushion which I made for your gift. He got furious by it. He got furious by listening to it because an important speech which he had to deliver the next day in front of the port authority where he was written on it, right? So he got furious by it because according to him those were really important papers and he had to deliver that speech tomorrow. So what he did, as a strict and disciplined father, he took a ruler. He took a ruler and he started beating on Kezia's hand. He started beating on Kezia's hand. Kezia started crying and she went to her room. Her father did that because he wanted to teach Kezia a lesson. And the lesson was, you shouldn't touch the things that doesn't belong to you. That was the moral behind that beating. He wanted to teach that girl that you shouldn't touch those things which doesn't belong to you. That's it. Now what happens when they did that? Kezia was crying. He was afraid of her father, but later she got more afraid of her father because he just beated her of no reason because she didn't understand that reason, right? So she got afraid, right? She started crying and she started hating her father more and more, right? That's what the whole psychology is about, right? Instead of trying to convey that same message in an orderly fashion, he could have said the same thing with a little of love, right? But instead, what he did, he took a ruler and he started beating on her hand. That's when you realizes it that it's a different world for children, right? We used to teach them in an adult manner. We can by conveying our thoughts to them, by talking to them softly, lightly, but we started beating, right? So she started becoming more afraid of her father rather than to be loving by him. She started becoming scared and scared, right? That's what this chapter was about, right? Our little girl who become more afraid, right? She was afraid, but after beating, after crying, we at that certain point we are afraid of our father as well at that time, right? Now there was one family in the neighborhood of Kezia, right? Mr. McDonald's, right? He was a loving father. He had 5 children, a loving wife, and he used to play with the children all the time. He used to play with the children all the time, and she used to watch that. By the fence, she used to stand, and she used to watch that he is playing with her father. They are all the children's playing with the father, and then she realizes that there are different kinds of father. One father who is caring and loving, Mr. McDonald, the neighbor. Second father, his father, Kezia's father, who is a strict person, who is a disciplinarian, right? He doesn't convey his thoughts, he doesn't play with Kezia. On the other hand, there was Mr. McDonald's, who play with their children every day, and she understands that there are different kinds of fathers. Now, once Kezia saw that he was playing with the Mr. McDonald's were playing with their children. There were 5 children. One was a small baby who was sitting on the shoulder of Mr. McDonald, and other 2 girls were just scratching his pockets of the coat, right? And 2 boys were there. So there were a lot of love in them, right? And that's what she wanted. According to me, that's what she deserved. That's what every child deserves, right? But she wanted that to be cared for, to be loved by her father, right? So she started comparing it. That my father is a cruel man. My father is not a good father. My father is a father who doesn't love his children. On the other hand, we have Mr. McDonald's who love their children, who love and who play with them, who care for them. That's what the comparison started, right? So that was one point at time at which she realized that there are different kinds of father, right? Later what happens, Kezia's mother, she got hospitalized. What happens? Kezia's mother got hospitalized, right? And her grandmother has to go to hospital because someone should be there in the hospital to take care of her mother. Now, because her mother is ill, she is hospitalized. Her grandmother went to take care of her, but that leave her and her father in the same house, right? And she is afraid of her father. She was afraid of her father a little bit, but because now she is alone in the house, she is afraid of her father more. That's where the problem started. She was scared to be in the house when her father was there. But her mother, but her grandmother said to Alice that you have to take care of her daughter, right? Granddaughter, because her grandmother moved to hospital. So so Alice, the cook, which I told you in the beginning, 5 characters were there. Now comes the part of Alice, the cook. Till day she used to address her, she used to talk to her, but things change when night happens, right? When she was sleeping in her bed, she had a frightful nightmare. Nightmare means a bad dream. So she had a bad dream at night. In that dream, she saw that a butcher was there. Butcher means one who cut meat. So a butcher was there. And that butcher was coming towards her with a knife, a butcher knife in one hand and a rope in other hand, right? And she got scared a lot, and she woke up crying. She woke up crying for grandmother, right? She started shouting grandma for grandmother, but grandmother wasn't there. Grandmother went to the hospital to take care of her mother, right? So at that time father was in that house. So father heard her screaming and he came into her room, and she was scared. She was crying because she just had a nightmare. All of you can think of that when you have a nightmare, you can't even move. At that time when you are that scared, you can't even move. That's the same thing happened with her. She was crying and she was scared so much that she couldn't even move, right? Her father came to her room. He saw that she had a nightmare and she was crying. So what he did, he took her in her arms and they both went to his room, the room of their parents. And the father made sure that she is sleeping next to her in her bedroom. At that time, she realizes that Kezia realizes that Kezia was afraid of father because he was a strict person, he was a disciplinarian. But when she saw that he took up in her arms and they went to his room, she started thinking that my father is not that cruel man. My father may even love me because he was caring for me. At that time, she listened to her heartbeat and she realizes that his heart was so big that she can listen to his heartbeats, right? At that time, her perception about her father changed, that she realizes that his father was a strict person. His father is a strict person. His father is a hardworking guy. But his father loved him in his own way. His father loved him in his own way. That's what Kezia's opinion about her father changed by that scene, right? She realizes that her father is a hardworking man, her father is a strict person, but her father loves her as well because he came down to her room when she was crying, when she was shouting. So he came to her to tender her, to care for her. He took her in her arms and they both went to his room and she slept there, right? That's when she heard, and her father, because he was a hardworking man, he was tired a lot and he slept instantly. He slept instantly. So she listened to his heartbeat and she realizes that his father got a big heart. His father got a warm heart, right? When she was listening to her heartbeat, his heartbeat, she realizes that her father is a strict person. Her father is a disciplinarian, but her father is caring as well. Her father loves her very much, and her father doesn't want her to be scared of her. He just want to be a little bit straight so that she will be disciplined. That's what our parents do as well. Our parents shout at us so that we will behave better. And that's what Kezia's father wanted from Kezia, that she will behave better. That's why he used to shout at her. But she realized it at that moment when she was sleeping on him. Then she realizes that yes, my father was a strict person, my father is hardworking, but he loves me in his own way. That way is different. That way is strict, but he still loves her. Right now, a number of things comes when you listen to this story, the little girl. Right. First, you came to know about the psychology of a little girl. Why she is afraid of her father. She thought that her father was a giant because she was little. Right. She think of different kind of things to hide herself, right, from her father. And when her father was not in the house, she roamed around freely, right? That's what psychology of a child is. Now all of you are afraid of your parents, maybe from your father or your mother, but a number of things comes up when we learn about this chapter. First thing, Kezia's attitude toward her father. She was scared of her. Second important thing comes up, when was her attitude changed? Right, towards her father. That is in the end. A number of questions which you won't find here, but you should. Right, that Kezia was happy when her father was not around. Right, but when her father was around, how she behaved? Did she behaved in good manner? Did she behaved in bad manner? Right? Those are some important questions which comes when we talk about Kezia. Right? Now, I want all of you to do one thing which I always did when I take class, that when you will write question and answers of this chapter, one thing you have to write. One or two topics I have given in Astra always. So one thing you have to write, that you have to write about a nightmare that you had. Right? Nightmare, all of you have understand, right? The baddest dream you have ever experienced. You have to write a paragraph. Right? You have to frame a long answer in that manner, and you have to write that. Right? A nightmare. Just like Kezia has, when a butcher with a butcher's knife and a rope in one hand and a butcher knife in other hand came to her, and she got scared. She started crying and she started sounding. That's what I want from you. Right? You have to write one paragraph of a nightmare. Right? Second thing, there are questions which are not in book, but we discussed in class. Right? So Kezia's attitude, according to you, was it correct? Was her scaredness justified? That's what I wanted to know. Right? Was she correct in her mind that she was afraid of her father? Right? Is there anything that her father could have done to her that would have changed her mind earlier? Is there anything what her mother or her grandmother could have done or supported her in any manner that Kezia would feel the warmth, the caring of her father? So those are some important cautions comes from the by reading this chapter, right? Those are not in general caution, those are not textbook cautions, but it comes that what you could have done differently to teach Kezia that her father is not an evil man. His father is not a giant. His father is not the person the she thinks. He is not that cruel person, right? So that's what one thing, right? Second, in place of Kezia, do you afraid of your father or your mother? You have to write that as well, right? So from that we can think of 2 or 3 cautions, extra cautions, which you can write, right? First, what you could have done differently to change Kezia's attitude toward her father, whether from the perspective of mother, grandmother, or her father, right? Second question, that the nightmare. You have to write the baddest nightmare you have seen, right? It could have been anything, right? But the baddest, the nightmare. Nightmare means bad dream, right? Third caution, Kezia's point of view, that she was scared of her father, and she was scared because she is a little girl. So you have to write from her psychology, that was she right in her manner that her father was the evil man, and why she think that her attitude, negative attitude towards her father, her negative attitude towards her father, but not everyone. Her father was cruel, her father was a strict disciplinarian, but not everyone else. So she started stuttering as well. So you have to write a caution from Kezia's point of view, her negative and positive attitude towards her father. You have to write one caution from your point of view, that why she was afraid and how could she change it. And third caution you have to write, that Kezia's nightmare was of a butcher, right, with a knife and a rope. You have to write your own, that you have to write your own nightmare. So in this manner you can write 3 cautions, right? Please read this chapter, The Little Girl, carefully. It's an important chapter, and it's about the psychology of a little child, right? So stay safe, stay home, take care.